So, hello again. I'm very happy that I can actually talk about my PhD thesis, which was 4 to 5 years of quite hard work, both for me and my supervisor, Philip Massman, who's here today. Unfortunately, due to time restrictions, I won't be able to talk about the whole thesis. So I'm just going to focus on roughly half of it, which is something you can call biological seafloor disturbance and climate change, which still probably sounds a bit cryptic, but we'll get there in the end. So first we'll have to make a link in how the seafloor actually impacts the climate or the Earth system, if you want. And if you take a look at the globe, at Earth today, arguably the two most important gases you have are oxygen, and because we need to breathe, and something we heard several times before, even by me, carbon dioxide. Now, these two gases are very closely linked in a process which is called photosynthesis, in which plants or algae in the ocean consume CO2 to build organic matter and biomass, and they create oxygen. Now, back when you were 12 or 10 or 12, if you learned about oxygen in the atmosphere, the reason we breathe, this is what you said. We have plants, there are trees, they photosynthesize and they create oxygen. But this picture is actually incomplete. To accumulate oxygen in the ocean, what you need is the removal of this organic matter. And the removal of organic matter on the globe happens in the seafloor. So burial in the seafloor of organic matter is what creates oxygen and consumes CO2 in the long term. Now, why only in the seafloor? If you look at any type of Earth or terrestrial realm, what happens is, if it rains, it runs off the land, it takes all particles, organic matter with it, transports it into the rivers and eventually into the ocean. That's where the burial happens. So then we can start looking, if we know that the link has been made between carbon dioxide, oxygen, and burial of organic matter in the seafloor, we can start thinking about what impacts or what influences organic matter. And this is where we come to animals. If you look at the seafloor today, there's a wide variety of animals, benthic fauna, that either live into the seafloor for protection or just to feed, or that go from the top and try to feed on the animals that actually live in the seafloor. So there's lots of stuff going on down there. And to make it simple, you can actually narrow this down into a very conceptual scheme in what happens when animals are in the seafloor. So if you have a sediment without animals, what happens is sediment particles accumulate. There's no mixing, there's no transport of interstitial water. So sediment particles accumulate from the top and they get eventually buried at the bottom of the sediment column. Now, if you add animals that are moving around and that are flushing their burrows, what happens is you have a mixed upper layer, which happens because of the movement. So the particles enter the sediment, get mixed before they eventually get buried. And also there's enhanced exchange between the overlying water and the water in the sediment, the pore water. And what does this mean for the geochemistry then? What does it mean for the organic matter processing in the sediment? Now, for that, we went to a field site in the United Kingdom, in Bredene. And there you have a very nice salt marsh where there's a wide variety of salt-filled pans, or ponds, basically. And you can categorize them in two ways. Either they have animals, or they don't have animals. And you can see at the sediment surface, you can distinguish which ones they have animals and which ones don't. The ones on the left, you can see the red crust, the iron oxides. The one on the right doesn't have the animals, it's dark. And you see it even better when you look at it from the side. The one where there are animals is it's black, but it turns into gray. It's sort of starved, if you want. If you look at the one where there are no animals, it's very dark and it smells like sulfite, which indicates that there's a lot of organic matter there. And indeed, when you analyze the organic matter content in these sediments, you see that the ones where the animals are actively mixing the sediment, the concentrations are lower, which means that less organic matter will be preserved, which means that if you decrease the amount of organic matter you take out of the system, you will decrease the oxygen in the atmosphere and you increase the CO2. So basically, the presence of animals in the seafloor has a very big role in processing the organic matter and a very, very big and important role in the oxygen content, the CO2 content of the atmosphere. And then you can start wondering what happens when the seafloor underwent a transition from an virtually undisturbed sediment to one that was inhabited by a wide variety of animals. And one such transition actually occurred in the history of the Earth. So some 540 million years ago, there was an event that's called the Cambrian Explosion, when we went from very small number of animals to suddenly a very high number of genera, a very wide diversity of animals. And a lot of these animals started living in the seafloor. There's also when predation kicked off, when there was sort of a runaway arms race for in the ecosystems. And so what happened there is that before the Cambrian explosion, the seafloor was covered in microbial mats, was very undisturbed. After the Cambrian explosion, it basically became a hub for all kinds of benthic fauna. And so you can put the observations we made in the salt marsh in Bredene, and also made by other researchers in different systems. So there's this change in organic matter burial. You can put this in a bigger Earth system model. And what you see is that when you increase the level of sediment disturbance, roughly coinciding with the Cambrian explosion, you get an increase in the intensity of ocean anoxia. So the oxygen content of the ocean went down. And also an increase in atmospheric CO2 concentrations, like an uptick by about 3 to 4 present atmosphere levels. And so basically the first evolution of animals that moved into the seafloor caused a sort of climate change. This is not the only event that ever happened. If you look at today, if you look at the seafloor, and the Belgian coastal zone is a very good example of this, there's a lot of different animals disturbing the sediment right now. It's very intensively exploited for fishing and also dredging. And so what happens when we dredge, we take up the sediment from the seafloor, we dump it somewhere else in the ocean. Bottom trawling, we take strong, heavy nets, we pull them, scrape them across the seafloor. And this is basically very similar to what the first bioturbators did back in 540 million years ago. And I was very lucky that I could actually, by accident, follow up one of these disturbance events. So after the depositing event, there was a 15 centimeters of sediment which was mixed, and I could follow the changes in organic matter decomposition rate. And what you see is that just after the event, and for 50 days, and for up to a year almost, the rate of organic matter breakdown was much higher than before the disturbance. And so now if you take this back to the picture, if dredging and trawling and other types of disturbances are doing roughly the same thing what animals did 540 million years ago, and we are affecting the preservation of organic matter in the seafloor, you can kind of start thinking what's happening, what are we doing to the globe. And this is where I'll leave you, and I'll just want to thank a wide variety of people that were with me and helped me throughout my PhD, and who I still like very much. So thank you very much.